More than 20 years ago, the burden of pain on the American society within the medical community reached a boiling point. So a shift towards more compassionate treatments for all patients suffering from chronic pain was in consideration, and after the publication of an observational study of tens of patients touting the use of opioid analgesics for chronic non-cancer patients, plus the 1995 FDA approval of a semi-synthetic opioid medication known to masses as Oxycontin, the prescription opioid market exploded. But all this was too good to be true, because the semi-synthetic formulations that promised small treatments of moderate to severe pain amongst patients was rather dangerous. This is known as the opioid epidemic and sometimes crisis. More than 700,000 lives have been lost and millions remain at risk. And from all that, let's explore a story of one family that somehow made billions of dollars while trading lives of innocents. It's all coming up right now when Asinga Unfolds. According to Harvard School of Public Health, in an article that they published earlier this year, it was suggested that without urgent intervention, 1.2 million people in the US and Canada were to die from opioid overdoses at the end of this decade. In the US, the opioid epidemic was obviously caused by several factors. But amongst all those factors, the one that involved the Sackler family gave new impetus to this crisis, after the family made some infamous painkillers known as Oxycontin that is said to play a big role in an opioid crisis, claiming over 50,000 lives every year and leaving millions in addiction. Drug overdose became the new leading cause of death in Americans below the age of 50. So as people got caught up into addictions and many dying from overdoses, the Sackler family was becoming richer every day. Now, let's understand the story of doctors that became billionaires at the cost of millions of lives of Americans and beyond. In 1952, three brothers and doctors that specialized in psychiatry by the names of Arthur Sackler, Raymond Sackler, and Mortimer Sackler purchased a pharmaceutical company known as Purdue. Under the Sackler brothers, Purdue exceeded expectations after its co-founder Arthur made big news when he made a drug called Valium. Arthur claimed that Valium could help patients in reducing, quote, psychic tension, end quote. Another milestone was later reached by Purdue following the 1980s medical movement known as the hospice movement. And just so you know, the hospice sector provides care for the sick people whose illness or condition cannot be cured and likely to lead to the patient's death. It was around that time that the Sacklers released a morphine-like pill called Oxycontin. The morphine pill manufacturer Purdue claimed that their newborn child Oxycontin was to help cancer patients who had difficulties to sleep find it more easy. At that time, it was almost impossible to tell if Oxycontin became addictive since it was used in hospice sectors where end-of-life patients soon died regardless. After these two famous drugs, the Sacklers and their pharmaceutical company Purdue received heartwarming hails as these brothers networked and made billions of dollars in sales. More fame and more money corrupted the Sacklers after their previous product Oxycontin, and so they decided to take this concept a step further. The company released Oxycontin for general use, making it the precursor to the drug that would later make an epidemic. In the US, Oxycontin became the standard analgesic for pain relief amongst cancer patients, after several papers and articles suggested that there was a very thin possibility tying up opioids and addiction. But as it turned out, this was all misinformation, because opioid users were at greater risks of addiction and death. However, this didn't make any bad news for Purdue, and the company decided to follow up on their previous victories by making yet another drug. In 1999, Purdue's co-founder Raymond Sackler's son, known as Richard Sackler, became the company's president. and he would constantly brainstorm ideas aimed at finding more uses of Oxycontin. Under the leadership of Richard Sackler, Purdue needed to do something about Oxycontin since the drug's patent started nearing its expiration date towards the 2000s. In addition, the use of morphine as an end-of-life medication in hospice sectors cast a slur on the drug, making it less available. So the company then decided to proceed making a new drug with the active ingredient Oxycontin, replacing morphine. This new drug was called Oxycontin. The American Medical Society believed that Oxycontin was weaker than morphine, but later realized that the active ingredient Oxycontin used by Purdue to replace morphine in Oxycontin was in fact 50% stronger than morphine. This later forced Purdue to revoke false claims in publications which indicated a 1% addiction rate, updating it to 13%. Even after a few voices brought this false claim to light, the Sacklers miraculously did not see any threats, and Purdue somehow received Oxycontin's approval from the United States Food and Drug Administration during December 1995, despite the company's allegedly early discovery of Oxycontin's risks. This got worse as time went on because in 2015, the FDA moved to grant Purdue another approval, allowing the pharmaceutical company to market their drug to children as young as 11. And despite growing criticism towards the company for its dangerously addictive drug, this didn't change because Purdue consistently blamed people for not consuming the drug correctly as instructed. Now, you know how the opioid crisis started and who was behind it. But this was not the end of this sinister story. As Purdue continued making billions of money from skyrocketing Oxycontin sales, addictions surged, leading to catastrophes. This brought damaging attention towards the Sacklers as their company faced piling class action lawsuits in regard to their practices with the drug. But, as always, the company continued quenching this raging fire by settling plaintiffs with millions of dollars. In cases like deceptive marketing and purposely pushing misconceptions about Oxycontin, saw Purdue paying over $610 million. But for a company and family that made billions of dollars, paying just over $600 million in lawsuit settlements was obviously nothing. The three Sackler brothers eventually died throughout the years. Arthur Sackler died in May 1987, Mortimer Sackler passed in March 2010, and Raymond Sackler would later pass in July 2017. However, Richard Sackler, who took over as Purdue's president in 1999, and some of his family members who served on the board are still alive. Richard went on to deny all the accusations surrounding their company, as it related to the opioid crisis that claimed lives of more than 500,000 Americans in just 2 decades. Essentially, the Sackler family used the bankruptcy of their company to protect themselves from facing civil liability, despite the family's total net assets equaling approximately $11 billion and almost $1 billion in cash, and holding over $3 billion in marketable securities, hedge funds, and brokerage accounts. I have to applaud all those people who tirelessly rioted throughout the country, rejecting the Sacklers and raising awareness about their evils. The Sackler family felt this pressure, and the world responded in each and every possible way. From removing their family name off so many institutions to charity organizations, refusing the Sackler family's donations. At some point, even the United States government came out to point out the effects of this opioid crisis as the then President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, declared this epidemic during the time when at least 100 Americans died every day in 2017. Later in 2021, Purdue pleaded guilty for the second time to federal crimes over its opioid practices. And in September that same year, the company was forced to cease its operations. But this is how things got off track in the beginning, even before the Sacklers. Let's say you or someone you know gets an injury that causes moderate or severe pain. An accident, for example. As a patient, you are rushed to a medical center or hospital for treatments. While at the hospital, you are given stronger painkillers for surgery or chronic pain. The drugs often given are life-enabling, as patients can avoid excruciating pain from injuries or otherwise. But as time goes by, you get discharged after completing your treatment. This means that you would no longer need more of those strong painkillers that you were provided with during your stay at the hospital. It is at this point that you realize how deep you fall into an addiction following withdrawals. As a result, some people move from prescription pharmaceuticals and advance to cheaper but more potent options. It can be heroin or fentanyl, and that, my friends, is how millions get into this opioid addiction trap that is still devouring mankind to this day. During the first 2 years of this COVID-19 pandemic, there was a 91% increase in apparent opioid toxicity deaths. Just between April 2020 and March 2022, over 15,000 deaths were recorded. And if you compare that to the 2 years before, where almost 8,000 deaths were listed between April 2018 and March 2020, the spike in these deaths is conspicuous as time moves forward. Between January and March 2022, a total of almost 2,000 apparent opioid toxicity deaths occurred, but there was beginning at that time, and as we near its end, just make your estimations. As some players get beat in the game, new players take over, and new drugs always come into the markets. As of now, pharmaceutical fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is typically approved for treating severe pain, traditionally advanced cancer pain, is teasing a new epidemic, mostly in the US. This time around, this news-making drug is 50 times stronger than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine, much stronger than Oxycontin, and many other opioids. If you ask what I personally take from all this, I would say that the Sacklers only opened the doorway to all this. And since they didn't face any accountability for their evil practices, it would seem to other manufacturers that this can be done successfully without fear of contradiction. And as powerful names or corporations continue to normalize enriching themselves on the cost of lives of innocents, we should all take extra precaution. However, to the victims, whether you are an addict who is fighting to get clean, or you are this person who lost a loved one to this epidemic, I'm sorry to hear that. And as things continue getting worse, I want to congratulate anyone who has triumphed the addiction and hope that you all be safe. Thank you for watching.